But the other story I wanted to tell was about how I came to this. I was first introduced to it as a teenager by somebody up in Woodstock, New York, and that sort of planted the seed. But I went to college and I dabbled with it here and there. But it's college; you're having fun and doing all sorts of things you shouldn't. And it was shortly after I met my wife. And our daughter was born. She was about 1.5, and we went on a 3-week trip to Guatemala. Now, Guatemala, especially in the 80s, was not exactly a tourist destination. We went to Panajachel, which is a village between the two volcanoes. It's a beautiful part of the country. And it was a really interesting trip because there were not a lot of, there were a number of people that lived in the town that were European and a couple of Americans, but it wasn't not tourist at all. It was the real deal. And, one of the things I noticed right away is most of the people in town had yellow eyes. The whites of their eyes was yellow, and that's hepatitis. So hepatitis A was endemic to Guatemala. There was no central sewage, and that was what really proliferated the virus. And we were really careful. I remember us going to this one restaurant all the time because it was run by some European people, and, they kept everything really clean. And I remember laying on the beach one day. There's this lake there that is between two volcanoes. I think at the time they didn't even know how deep it was. It was such a deep lake. It was a beautiful lake. And we're sitting on the shore there, and there's this little kid comes by and he's selling chocolate covered banana pieces. And I just, I felt bad for him because like he's trying to scrape together like, you know, for the day. If he got $1 for the whole day, I think that was a lot. So I bought them and I should have just tossed them, but I ate them. And I didn't get sick right away, but when I got back I was living in California at the time. When I got back to California, I remember I was cooking dinner and all of a sudden I just felt incredibly nauseous, and my smell was heightened by fivefold. I could smell people's breath across the room, and it turns out I had hepatitis A. So I went to the doctor, and I didn't know I had hepatitis, but I went to the doctor and they confirmed it was hepatitis. And, I was really sick. I mean, at this time, I was 26 years old, and, I could barely get out of bed. I was achy, chills, fever, like really sick. So I decided to go to an acupuncturist in town, and she gave me an acupuncture treatment, and she gave me a big bag of Chinese herbs, which is a bag about this big of like roots, sliced roots and berries and twigs and rhizomes. And we took it home. My wife cooked it up for me, and I drank a cup and went to bed. And I woke up the next morning and I felt probably 80% better easily. And I was just like, I remember after the acupuncture treatment, I felt very, very relaxed. I tend to have a fair amount of anxiety, so like that was a big plus for me. And but when I saw what the Chinese herbs did for me, I was utterly fascinated by that. And I remember saying, I want to do this. Like this is what I want to do with my life. And that was the seed sort of that really germinated. I didn't apply to school right away. That's when we headed back east. I bought the health food store. We ran it for about 3 years. We actually ran it for 9 years, but about 3 years into it is when I applied to school. And finished school, took a year to sell the business, and started practicing up in Massachusetts, and moved back to New Jersey in 1998, where my first day on the job, I remember I had 28 people, which was probably what I was used to in a month. So it was a bit of a baptism by fire, but I've never looked back. I've loved every minute of it. And, I've just deepened my knowledge and refined it and to be fair, so has the world. I mean, the level of education that's out there now, the level of just understanding about how different herbal medicines work or how different vitamins work. There's been many, many, many studies done in the last 40 years. So it's really come a long way, and I've pretty much tried to I have kept up with it. I mean, I'm 66 and I still listen to classes every week. I love it. You know, it's just like this insatiable urge to learn more, learn more, learn more about how the human body works. Because my belief is that we are put on this planet and we have what we need to stay well. And I use the word stay well because people do things, they eat a poor diet, they don't sleep correctly, they don't exercise, yada, yada. And they end up with an illness of some sort. You know, I think right now, according to Robert Kennedy, Secretary of Health and Human Services, the chronic disease rate in the United States amongst adults is 60%. And when his uncle was president in 1961 and 2, it was about 6%. So we have a society where 60% of the adults are suffering from one or more chronic diseases. This is a direct reflection of how we live. Okay, you don't have a 60% chronic disease rate in a population that's living life anywhere near the way it's supposed to. And, you know, now we have these chemical petroleum-based medicines that we've had for the last 70 years that have taken on a life of their own because of the profitability of them. And nobody is sick because they don't have enough statin. People don't have high cholesterol because of a statin deficiency. People don't have high blood pressure because they have a deficiency in hypertensive medication. People don't have, women don't have painful periods because they lack the pill. These are things that are all fixable. Hypertension can be genetic, so I don't want anybody out there who's hearing this who has hypertension to feel bad. I mean, that can be a very difficult condition to treat. But cardiovascular disease, diabetes, these are all preventable diseases in most cases. And that's really what I'm trying to show here is that, you know, if you take care of yourself, even do a 50% job in terms of, like, you know, if your goal is 100% and it's this, that, and the other thing, if you do at least 50% of that, you are going to be substantially less sick than people who don't. And this isn't about, you know, oh, I just heard about the latest, greatest Shilajit or the latest, greatest form of vitamin B or the latest, greatest herb that came from, you know, the mountains of Tibet or something like that. Those things are all fine and well, good. You know, they're all well and good, but it really comes back to understanding how your body works individually because everybody is different. So what I do with everyone is, you know, I take the time to ask a lot of questions. I usually have an onerous amount of paperwork for them to fill out because I want to know every last little detail of their life. Sometimes the littlest detail that you would never think about can make all the difference in terms of determining how to fix somebody's health. But the main point I want to make here is that if your healthcare practitioner, your doctor is not personalizing the treatment to you, they're not really helping you get healthier. You know what I'm saying? Like you could go in and go, oh, your cholesterol is 220 and your LDL is 100 and whatever. You know, I want you to go on a statin. The next time you do a blood test, I guarantee you, your cholesterol level is going to be lower. But does that mean you're healthier? No, it really doesn't. In fact, in a lot of cases, the lower cholesterol is not healthy. You're talking about lowering something that, you know, when you look at your total cholesterol of, say, 200, well, 150 milligrams of those 200 milligrams were made in your liver for use in your body. So it begs the question, like, how bad is cholesterol if your body makes it? And the other side of that coin is it's needed. Your brain is made of, you know, a good part of the brain mass is cholesterol. Every cell wall in your trillions of cells that you have in your body is made of cholesterol. It is the container that we are. Our skin and tissue that hold us together is made from cholesterol. You know, and I could say the same thing about a number of other drugs, you know, like diabetes is a perfect example. Like the first line of defense is metformin. Well, metformin works great. It lowers blood sugar and It helps people lose weight. But really what they need to do is stop eating so many carbs, and they need to start exercising and burning some of that blood sugar. And then they won't need metformin. And metformin stops working like most drugs. They work for a while and then they stop working. So they add a new drug. And then you have a new problem, which is called polypharmacy, when you're adding drugs to treat the side effects from other drugs. And pretty soon you have, 75-year-olds that are on 8, 9 drugs. That's called polypharmacy. And I just learned this recently. I knew it was high, but I had no idea how high. That a third of the number 3 leading cause of death amongst adults in the United States is physician error. So it's either a procedure where there was an error, or it was a prescription where there was an error. And I had a building manager once, the first place I rented for my office, and I didn't see him for a couple of days. I was friendly with him. And I saw him one day and I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And he goes, "Well, not that great. I just went to the doctor earlier in the week and they gave me these 2 medicines for my allergies. And they didn't work together and they destroyed my kidneys. And so I have no kidney function left." Now, I don't know how much you know about this, but to go on dialysis is absolutely miserable. You have to get hooked up to a machine for 2 or 3 hours at a time, at least twice a week, sometimes more. And you go on a donor transplant list that you may never get to the end of. And that was like the first time I was really like, I'd heard about this stuff, but I never knew anybody, and I was just in absolute shock. And he was kind of nonchalant about it, but I don't think he understood what he was headed into. So I would really encourage everyone to, if they are suffering, or if they're starting to get these, kind of niggling pains and little signs that something's not quite right, to go to someone like myself that will sit down and figure out why you are not doing well, as opposed to instead of identifying, oh, this is irritable bowel syndrome. Well, what is the irritable bowel syndrome caused by? Why do you have irritable bowel? Some people have it because of stress. Some people have it because of food allergies. Some people have it for reasons of the thyroid. There's a lot of reasons for irritable bowel, and sometimes it's three out of 6 reasons are the reasons that you have it, and you have to address all of those, or you're not going to get better. But in a nutshell, I would say my point here today in telling these stories is that everybody's an individual, and so is their illness is individualized, and that you can take care of yourself and avoid a lot of this. I once had a patient, she was 75, and she went into a doctor's office and they asked her what medication she was on. And she's like, "Well, I'm not on any medication. I don't need anything." And the nurse looked horrified that there was a 75-year-old who didn't take any kind of drugs, and said, "Well, don't worry, the doctor will help you figure that out. Like, he'll get you on some drugs." And she said, "You know what? I'm going to find a different doctor. I'm going to leave now." And she left. And that's the proper response, because being on drugs, while it's common, is not normal and it's not healthy. It is the 3rd leading cause of death in the United States is prescription medication. So think about that. And just to be clear, I want to be clear with people. I am not anti-medication. I've literally had fights with people to keep them on, say, a hypertensive medication, or keep them on thyroid medication, because there weren't alternatives in those cases. So there is a place for them. But I would say many of the prescriptions that are written do not need to be written. The people just need to understand what they have to do to change their body, change their life to change their body. It is our God-given right. I believe that. That's all, folks.